Can you remember prison slang?
The one that sticks to mind is, I don't even know if it's slang, but it's just a saying, yeah? Last call showers. It bugs me.
That is trauma.
Yeah, trust me. You hear that and you're like, damn, I ain't even had a shower yet. Run to the shower.
Last call showers.
Yeah. Anyway, last call showers, yeah.
Yeah.
Never again.
And welcome back to Life After Prison. So today we are joined by two guests who are going to share their journey and experience of life after prison.
Yes, we're joined by Ben Jones and Steve Gerlin, who are here to talk about how gambling affected their lives and the work they do now in the sector. So welcome, Ben and Steve. How you doing?
I'm all right. I've got a nice tash going on for November.
All right.
Yeah.
Big up yourself.
Going
November.
strong. Going strong.
It is strong. You suit it.
Yeah.
It's looking good. It's going to keep it.
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
And Steve, how are you?
Yeah, good. Yeah, really good. Good to be here.
Yeah.
Good to be alongside Ben as well. So yeah, really looking forward to speaking to you.
Great.
Just to say, from the start, offset, you two know each other, right?
Yeah.
Tell us how you know each other.
Well, we actually wrote to each other in prison, I think. Yeah, we did, didn't we?
Yeah,
Is
we
it?
did. Yeah, we
this
did.
goes way back.
Yeah. So when I was waiting to go to prison, I was looking for other people who had similar story to me, and I came across Steve. So I knew of him because his happened a little bit before mine. And I think my wife and your wife got in contact and passed on details. And yeah, we ended up writing to each other a couple of times.
Yeah.
Just as you were being released, I think. And now we do some work together for Reframe, which I'm sure you'll talk about later.
Yeah. So we do some work with Reframe and also co-host together on Hold or Fold on National Prison Radio.
Yeah.
Hold or Fold, the new show from National Prison Radio.
Yeah. So that's been good in that last few months. Recording that.
It's been really good. Yeah, really good experience.
That's good to hear, man.
And I guess you both you touched on it a little bit just now, saying, similar situations, but yeah, you both went through gambling addiction, didn't you? And your offences relating to that. So can you tell us how that started, where that started? Steve, do you want to go first?
Yeah. So for me, throughout my career, got my head down, worked really hard to try and get to, for me, it was try and get to that next thing. What is that next thing? You get there and I was never happy with what it is. So it's like, right, go again. Whether that was qualification, job promotion, new job entirely. And I was at this stage in my career where I'd got to there. So I was a chief finance officer. I'd hit that ceiling. I was a good salary, company car, pension scheme, all of that stuff. But I weren't happy. And I really struggled with my well-being for a number of years. And for me, I saw gambling as a way of self-medicating and making myself feel better. So I remember I'd always been a kind of a casual gambler, but I can remember getting some free spins sent to like my email, and I thought, oh, they're free. Why not? Let's have a go. And I can remember that feeling really vividly of going from this feeling of like really low in terms of sort of self-esteem, well-being, to all of a sudden this elation of playing on online slots and winning. And for me, that kind of snowballed really quickly into my addiction. So I was constantly trying to replicate that feeling of elation. But
chasing that
yeah,
high to a certain extent.
But of course, as soon as that feeling goes, you then go back down again to probably a much worse place each time.
Why do you feel like you were struggling, with what you were doing? Why did you feel like you needed that gambling at that time?
Yeah. So for me, and part of my recovery was kind of trying to unpick some of that stuff, and I'm still probably doing some of that now, to be honest. But trying to sort of relate back to why that happened. And for me, I look back even to sort of my childhood, and I was never really fully present in my life. And, at the time where I was gambling, I had a wonderful, still got a wonderful wife, but, wife, 2 kids at home, and had no reason from the outside looking in to be feeling the way I was.
It looked picture perfect, but
exactly.
It's different, isn't it? When you're in there,
exactly. But I had no way, and part of this, again, stems back to my childhood. I had no way and I didn't know how to sort of regulate my emotions. Okay. So all of this, what I was feeling, I was suppressing internally. And over the years, that kept building up and building up. And that, I think, for me, is why I kept looking for, the next thing, because it's going to make me feel better. and I even think like when I'm looking back to childhood and right, I need the new computer game, I need a new pair of football boots, and I see it now in sort of every, look at society, it's constantly advertising things to try and make us feel a certain way. But I never really had that emotional awareness growing up for a number of reasons. And I think that's sort of where it come through. And it wasn't until sort of adulthood that really that's where, I started to notice it. And for me, the way to sort of medicate some of that was through self-medicating through gambling. I'd already tried to go to a GP and that.
Oh, beforehand, or was it when you... Was that beforehand, before the gambling, you went to a
Yeah,
GP?
so before the gambling, because I'd noticed that I was sort of struggling with my well-being.
Yeah.
I tried to speak to a few people, so I tried to speak to my work at the time, and was told in no uncertain terms to grow a pair, basically, which then makes it go even more internal. So you've plucked up the courage to speak to someone, and they literally sort of
That's
bat
the
it
wrong
back at you.
approach.
Yeah. And that's no blame. Like we're talking sort of nearly 15 years ago now. So, that conversation around mental health has changed an awful lot in that time.
It's developed quite
But I
well.
also spoke to the GP, and the solution I was given was medication. And I did go on medication and still felt the same. So I went back to the GP and I was given more medication.
Was it the
and still
medication
felt the same.
to make you feel better? What kind of
So
just to help you feel good?
Yeah, but so I was on antidepressants basically. So I was prescribed a course of antidepressants to make me feel a bit better.
And it didn't work.
No, it didn't work. And again, for me, was trying to find that solution. So at that time, I then changed jobs. Because I thought, new surroundings,
fresh
start. It was the next step on the career ladder for me as well. And that was then in that job where I then turned to gambling to medicate.
Okay. And when did you realise that the gambling became a problem, became an issue?
Not for a long time. So I probably... So my crime was stealing funds from the company I was working for to fund my addiction. And I was someone who'd never really been in trouble before in my life, even going back to school, I was relatively like a good boy. But here I was in this position where I knew the company I was working for had one bank account that never really got audited. And I thought, well, I'll borrow some money to fund my gambling win and, pay it back. And I'd spent the money, but then there was never no knock on the door, no email. And I thought, I'll do it, I'll do it again. And that was a vicious cycle really for 3 long years.
Wow.
And in the end, I think, in answer to your question, I feel as though it was my body giving me the alarm of this is an issue now. So I basically went to A&E because I thought I was, having a heart attack basically, and had an ECG. And it was just a panic attack. But I truly believe that's my body giving me an alarm of, Steve, you need to stop.
Manifestation of stress.
Yeah.
Yes, this isn't going to end well. And that was that alarm coming out in my body. And it was at that point where I kind of I need to do something.
So what did you do then?
It wasn't for a couple of months until I actually decided to stop gambling, because again, that solution when you're in the addiction phase is to go to the very thing which is causing most of the harm. So what I did do after a few months was try to take myself out of that situation. So I resigned from my position. I literally resigned, and the very next day was off sick. I had to give a couple of months notice due to the position I was in, but the day after I just went off, that was it. And that for me was that was hard then, because it was a realization of everything that you've been doing. And then after a couple of weeks, work started to notice, because they started to have a look at some of my work, and the standard of my work had really deteriorated. And I remember having a conversation with my wife, because she said, "Look, work are concerned. Like, your standard of work has dropped. What's been going on?" She knew I was ill, and that was the first time that I'd been honest for so many years. And
so, did she know about the gambling?
She didn't at that point, and
Right.
that was where I broke down in tears.
I mean, that must have been a lot, like for 3 years, maybe longer, and not even being able to tell your wife. Did you feel like you was, keeping a secret this whole time? Or
Yeah,
felt like you were lying?
Yeah, so I was very selective in some of the things that I'd say to not just my wife, but at work and people around me, just to try and keep up gambling, just to keep so I could have access to it.
Yeah.
So my wife knew that I'd gamble occasionally on football, and I'd even show her like bets that I was having on that, but she had no idea about the online slots and the roulette that I was playing.
I guess it's almost like easier to be able to show a little bit of like, if you didn't talk about the gambling at all, it would be like you can't even talk about it. But because you could talk about just a little bit, it was kind of like I can say that I'm gambling, but I don't have to show the big picture behind it. So
totally, yeah.
God, it must be, you know, not easy to do, but like to be able to share a little bit was just doable.
Yeah, totally. And I was even showing her like the bets, so she knew the bets that I was placing on sports, but I had no idea about all of this online casino that I was literally waking up in the morning, first thing doing, even like late at night. You know, just being in the office and working, but reality was I wasn't. I was pressing a button to spin on a roulette wheel or a slot machine. So yeah, I eventually told her, and that was where all of the emotions come out. I burst into tears. First time probably I'd shown any emotion for a long time. Half expecting her to sort of kick me out the door, to be honest. And, you know, I would have had no qualms if, you know, that had been the case. But I told her that I'm really struggling with gambling. I've got gambling addiction, but I've also been stealing from my workplace to fund it. But she very calmly just sort of put her arms around me and just said, look, you know, I said, for better, for worse, on our wedding vows, I'm going to get you all the help you need.
Oh, big up, wife.
Yeah. And do you know what? That has been a constant it was always a constant prior, but has still been a constant through so many uncertain times since then. So that was obviously criminal proceedings were then about to start. And, you know, as we know, all going through prison and stuff and all what that brings for a loved one.
Wow.
But yeah, she's been there and is still there now. So I'm so grateful for that.
Appreciate that, man. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah,
that, Steve,
thank
man.
you.
So, Ben, for you, how did you get into gambling?
So when I was 16, 17, 18, like I almost had the world at my feet. I was getting straight A's in my schooling. I was playing sport at quite a high level. It was almost like life was easy for me. And then I don't know what happened, but I started to struggle with my mental health towards the end of college. Because I remember I dropped out of college about 4 months before my A-levels. And I went back to take them, but I stopped going to school because I was struggling. And then I went off to uni and I just didn't socialise with anyone. I didn't make any friends. I just wanted to be alone. I'd sit in my room and I'd game. And I think I was probably suffering with depression at that point, but I didn't know it at the time. And
looking back in it as retrospectively.
Yeah, exactly. Looking back retrospectively, that's probably what was happening. But one thing that, you know, growing up around sport, that I was always intrigued by predicting what was going to happen in sports, and thought that I probably had a bit more knowledge than the average person. So I kind of naturally just fell into gambling in my first year at uni, doing little bits and bobs. And then in the second year, my long-term partner at the time, who's now my wife, she fell pregnant, and we were at university together. Okay. And, you know, she fell pregnant at uni, and everyone's telling us, our parents are telling us, you know, you can't afford a baby, it's going to cost all this much money. And I think I started to believe it, and I started to think, I need to quit uni, and I need to get a job, I need to provide. And this was 2009, 2010, so no one was recruiting. It was, you know...
What were you studying, by the way?
Psychology.
Okay.
Psychology.
Cool.
So...
Were you aiming to try and, you know, get a job in that field or something different?
Honestly, I don't know.
You didn't know? Okay.
I don't know. It was just kind of typical 18 years old,
survival
don't know what to
mode.
do. Yeah. Yeah, so I just picked something that I had an interest in. I tried to join the RAF, tried to join the armed forces. Okay. They weren't recruiting. So I thought, right, well... maybe I can make some money gambling. So that's what I started to do more and more. And it didn't go very well, let's put it that way. And by the time I left uni, it was at the stage where if you told me today, I can't gamble, you know, until Monday next week, it would have been like you told me you can't eat until Monday next week. Like I was that physically dependent on gambling, but it just never stopped. And I ended up getting quite a good sales job up in Nottingham after uni. I started to earn decent money, and it was a good job for me because the harder I worked, the more money I earned,
which meant commission-based kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly. And that meant I could gamble more. So that's all I did. And it just escalated, and it started off at, you know, spending a bit of my spending money every month to gambling, to the point where I was now spending my rent money and food money.
Wow.
And then, you know, doing the usual credit cards, loans, overdrafts.
And at that point, when you were, you know, you had this job, this good job, were you enjoying the job?
I wouldn't say I was enjoying it. It wasn't. I didn't really have a passion for it, and I think that was part of what fueled the gambling, because I did have a passion, as it were, for sport and for gambling, and for predicting and the competitiveness of it. The job was pretty boring, pretty dull. So I think, again, that was just
another way to escape that.
Exactly, a way to escape that.
And at that point, did you realise? Did you realise that you had a gambling problem, or when did you realise?
I do remember. I remember sitting in the office one day Googling signs of gambling addiction, and this was probably about 4 years before I stopped gambling. So, you know, relatively early on, I kind of knew that I had a problem, but I think I read some stuff on this website about the signs and symptoms. I thought, that's not me. I don't have a problem. I'm not that bad, like a lot of us do. And so I kind of dismissed it, and
why did you dismiss it then?
I just thought, I'm not that bad. That's not me. So I carried on gambling, and then it got to the point where eventually I had no money for rent, no money for food. I couldn't get any more money from anywhere in terms of the banks. I was using payday loans.
Wow.
And similar to Steve, my first thought that came to mind was, I'll borrow some money from work and use that to gamble. And I just never paid it back. It never ended up, you know, going back into the account. And that escalated for a number of years, until eventually I was pulled into the office and they'd realised what was going on. And that, like Steve, that was the first time I'd ever admitted to anyone that I had a gambling problem.
Wow.
So even, sorry, you said she's your wife now. But
yes.
When you're with her at the time, you didn't tell her either.
No, she didn't know what was going on. And actually, the day that work found out what was going on, that was the day I told my wife as well. She had no idea.
Whoa.
She had no idea that I was even gambling, never mind gambling to the extent I was.
What was it like to withhold that, to not tell anyone? What was that like?
It was really tough. And you know what? For the last couple of years I was gambling, I wanted to stop, because I could see that I was stealing money and I knew where that was heading. But I was so scared to tell my wife, because we had a daughter at the time. And in my mind, it was, if I tell her, she's going to leave me, I'm going to lose the kids.
Yeah.
So I gambled for a couple of extra years just out of fear that she was going to leave me. And of course she didn't. And like Steve, we've both got really strong women in our lives who've been our rocks.
Excellent.
And I just wish I'd have told her, you know, 2-3 years before, because I would have saved myself.
What stopped you from telling her?
Just the fear that she would leave me. I genuinely thought, she's going to leave me, because I've been lying to her for 7 or 8 years by this point.
Wow.
You know, and it was, you know, we didn't go on holidays. We didn't do anything like that, because I would just say to her, oh, work's not going great. I'm not earning much money. And then when I did win a bit of money and I had a bit of spare cash, I'd say, oh, I had a really good month. I got a bonus, and I'd treat the family. So it was very easy for me to hide it, because I could just blame it on how well I was doing at work.
Yeah.
So,
and that wouldn't raise any suspicion at all.
No, exactly, because I was the only one working at the time. You know, all the money went into my bank account. She didn't know what was going on. So, yeah.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that. Huh? What did you go to prison for, and how long did you eventually get?
So for me, I was sentenced to 4 years for theft. So it was theft from my employer, 2nd of January 2019. Norwich Crown Court literally grew up like a stone's throw away from where the court and the prison was.
Yeah, so for me, it was fraud by abuse of position, and it was 3 years, November 30th, 2019. So, yeah, Steve's story was in the news at the time, just as I'd been caught. So I was keen to try and find out kind of what my sentence would be by looking at other cases. So that's where I came across Steve, and yeah, 3 years in the end.
Okay.
And just a question for you guys: do you feel like your gambling addiction, the actual addiction, was taken into account or into consideration in the courtroom, or?
So for me, I can remember when I got into prison writing a few things down whilst they're fresh in my memory. And one thing was that, Jules, like, I didn't feel as though there was much in terms of that being explored as a like a mitigating factor.
Actually having a problem with gambling.
Yeah, I can remember that the judge said he was quite dubious of the fact that I had a gambling addiction, and it weren't until sort of later through my prison sentence where I sort of asked for records from, you know, the gambling operators where I could see how much I'd staked over that short period of time. And I just thought if that information was available at the time, then obviously that would not have been in the judge's, he wouldn't have questioned that.
Yeah.
So I can remember thinking I was a bit sort of disheartened by that because it kind of painted a different picture for those looking from the outside in, given the fact that it had been on the news and, you know, I was going into prison and people were thinking, actually, I've got some money stashed away. Do you know what I mean? So it was potentially quite harmful for me as well. But yeah, I did think that and just thought, like, I don't think it's really been given the attention it deserves. And I think some of that is, I think we're getting better now, but I think some of it's that lack of awareness around gambling as an addiction. You know, it's not, hasn't been seen on par as, you know, the drug and alcohol, for example. I think we're slowly getting there in raising awareness of gambling.
Yeah.
You mentioned there that, you know, it could have been potentially harmful or dangerous for you inside. How did you navigate that?
Just by being honest and telling the truth, which, you know, I think because of my case going on the news and I was going to my local jail, a lot of people literally just watched that and then I turn up. So they say, oh, here he is.
Oh, here's the money spinner.
Yeah, exactly. But no, exactly that. Like, where's the money? Were like the questions I was getting, like literally just turned up. It's like, what's going on here? But like everyone was cool. Everyone was all right. And it just saying that that's not the case. That's not how it is. And most people have been in that situation themselves, so they understand. But yeah, just I was like, I don't know if you've seen like Jerry Maguire.
Yeah,
and, like there was a few shouts of "Show me the money" across the on the landing. So yeah,
that's typical prison. But
yeah.
And what about you, Ben? Did you have a similar experience?
Yeah, so I had a psychiatric report done before my sentencing, and it said in that report that I was suffering from severe gambling addiction. So the judge did note that in mitigation, but I feel like he said it because it was there, but didn't necessarily take it into account, because in the very next sentence, he says that I stole the money out of pure greed and it was to live a lavish lifestyle and all this stuff that maybe they do normally see with fraud, but it wasn't the case for me because literally everything I had was going on gambling. So yeah, a bit like Steve, I was pretty disheartened by that and frustrated that the fact that money wasn't going on expensive cars or holidays. It was going to a gambling company. So yeah, but like I say, I think it's getting a bit better nowadays now that there's more awareness around it.
Yeah.
So then what was going into prison like then? What was that like for you both?
It was pretty scary. I'll be honest. I never ever thought I would be in prison. Like, I just could never see myself there. So, you know, when I'm in a sweat box and everyone seems to know each other and everyone else is banging and I'm sat there like in the fetal position, like crying. I wasn't crying,
stop.
but it was. And
Listen, even if you did cry, it's fine. Like, it's okay. It's a stressful, sad situation. So even if you did,
But it's such a mixture of emotions.
It
isn't
is.
it?
It is. And I was trying to work out like when I would be out and when my tag date would be and all this stuff. And then we got to H&P Nottingham and I was in the holding cell and I was the only one in a suit. I was in a full suit and tie and everyone else is in like
shoes as well.
Yeah. So everyone's taking the mick out of me and whatnot. But,
did you do the prison tracksuit with the shoes?
No. I took some trainers in with me.
Okay, smart.
Yeah. I took some trainers in with me.
Oh, mate.
Zach's like, no,
because you
don't
can't.
tell me you did it.
Listen, I've seen it a lot, and the shoes with the tracksuit. It's not one. It's not a look, and it's just like, hard work, man.
I think it's also a bit different for guys, isn't it? Because when you're dressed in smart, it's suit. Like for females, for women, it's kind of like you could just be really trying to look good. Like,
I hear you.
do you know what I mean? You don't. You just bait that you're in a suit. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh, that's all right though.
The thing is, I'd been doing research before because I was trying to figure out what I could take in. And the thing I saw online was like, oh, you can't take any branded clothes. So I didn't take any clothes with me. And I took paper and pens and toiletries. They took all that off me.
Of course they did, yeah.
But like, what I was reading online was like, oh yeah, you can take this. I think I must have been reading
boxers, socks,
yeah,
and that's
sliders.
Yeah, I had sliders. I did have sliders. Yeah.
Because showering,
Yeah,
if you ain't got flip flops or it's
a no-no.
in socks.
Yeah.
Oh, it's the worst thing. Showering in socks. Ugh. But
Oh my God, stop.
putting your bare foot on them shower floors. No. Sorry.
No.
Yeah, sorry, we digress, but yeah.
No, it's all right. Yeah, so I literally, I went in, they must have thought I was some sort of fool, like the way I went in with all this stuff and got everything taken off me. And I think I was in prison tracksuits for about 6 months before I managed to buy, to buy stuff. So yeah, nightmare.
And for you, Steve? Obviously, other than the Jerry Maguire stuff.
Yeah. So I was under investigation for probably a year prior to sentencing, so I was pretty much ready. I wanted to, like, I knew what was coming, but I wanted to get there because as soon as I got there, the sooner I'm going to be out.
Yeah.
But then you say that as soon as you do get there, you're thinking, going through, I remember going through reception and being asked questions like, you do the nurse comes to do like a screening questionnaire. Any issues with drugs, alcohol? Was no. Any questions? Yeah, I'm here because of my crimes related to gambling. Got any support? Nah.
Whoa.
Nah, we don't. There's nothing we do for gambling. You'll have to jump on to another course, and hopefully that's all right, basically. Wow. So I think that was kind of my first, right, I know I'm not going to get any additional support here, so I need to do what I can do to sort of help in the next phase of my recovery. And I think that kind of, whilst it was disappointing, it actually helped because I knew at the very outset, if I need to do any work, I need to do it for me and need to find it. And
it shows that you wanted to do it, because if you don't go and find it in prison, then it's not going to get done. Yeah. And you don't want it enough.
And I think as well, that year under investigation, whilst at the time felt horrible because I wanted to get it sorted, that allowed me to start recovery and I had treatment before going into prison. And that gave me that foundation to build that belief and that mindset going in. Because if I didn't have that, I think I would have found the experience a lot different.
Yeah. Ben, did you have support before going into prison with your addiction?
Yeah, so I had about a year as well. Okay. So I was in a pretty good place recovery wise. I did seek out support in prison and again, nothing available. Wow. So I ended up in AA meetings.
I was going to say, because I went to... I met a lady in prison and she had a gambling addiction, but there was no GA or anything like that. It was AA. Yeah. And she was like, oh, please come with me. I went with her, just with her.
That's nice.
Yeah. Also, I think it's important for young people, my offence was related to alcohol. And I think it's important to go and experience these things just to hear about how things can really, really escalate, or just get some knowledge and just to support her with GA. So it was just interesting to know that we had to go to the AA because there was no GA. Yeah.
So then if you didn't have that support prior, how would that have affected your sentences differently then?
I think it would have been very difficult to go in because I was gambling up until I was caught. So if I was arrested that day and remanded, it would have been very difficult for me to stop, I think, in all honesty. I don't know. Obviously, in hindsight, I don't know. But having that year space to get that support and start recovery made a massive difference for me, I think.
Yeah, and I think it probably wouldn't have affected so gambling does happen within prisons. And for me, it was a different type of gambling. Yeah. So a lot of mine was online. Obviously, in prison, it's for a
tin of tuna
or whatever, over a game of pool or something. Yeah. So it's different. And I think for me, what I would have struggled with was all of the other stuff that comes with how do I deal with this stuff? So how do I deal with the fact that, I can't see my children and had proceeds of crime going on in the background as well.
Mate, so that's stressful in itself.
Yeah, really stressful. So how do I deal with that?
Got gambling.
Yeah, I think So I think that probably would have been the knock-on effect. I think gambling, I may have been able to do that abstinence and not get involved with any of that stuff. But treatment helped with so much wider